If you've been watching my recent videos, you'll know that I love to see if you or a specific fictional character can beat or survive analog horror and other fictional horrors. And now, because of a few comments I've received regarding Home Safety Hotline, I wanted to add their entities to that list. For those of you who don't know, Home Safety Hotline is a horror puzzle video game made by Night Signal Entertainment. You, the player, work for the Home Safety Hotline company as a phone operator attempting to give the correct information on how to deal with ordinary and supernatural household entities. And of course, the supernatural kind have some very dangerous and disturbing entities, some of which the Home Safety Hotline team can't properly help with. Those are what we'll be looking at and determining if you could survive them. So, if you end up enjoying the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated, and everything I talk about will be linked in the description for you to check out too. I'll also have my second channel, Soda Jump, linked there as well. I also just want to quickly shout out Myth's Crypt Film Fest 2. I've talked about it a few times before in previous videos, and the event has come to an end. Congratulations to the winners, Raisa Munir, SkyeBird, Edward Taylor, and ZealotDrake. My favorite video was definitely Raisa's, called Lunch and Cleaning. It's that quick and snappy horror with a twist that I love. So I hope you enjoyed that video and the other winners, which will all be linked in the description for you to watch. And with all of that being said, let's see if you can survive Home Safety Hotline's most disturbing entities. Let's start off by looking at Pookas because those things are just absolutely messed up and disturbing. This shapeless creature of Celtic legend takes the form and likeness of a loved household pet in order to replace them. You'll know that you have a Pooka in your household if the pet you've known and loved for years begins acting strange. In this example picture, you can see this person's dog standing on its hind legs staring down at its victim. Pookas do this because they thrive by scaring and unnerving the homeowner of the pet they've replaced, and pray that you don't find the state that your pet's been left in before it was replaced. A gory and decaying sight is what will greet you as you grovel at the corpse of the loyal and loving animal you once called one of your bestest of friends. But if you did find them, that would be all the motivation you need to get rid of this mischievous entity. There are two main routes we can take here in surviving a Pooka. A very clear passive and not so passive route. The passive route involves ignoring the Pooka since, as said before, they thrive on attention by scaring you, the owner of the house and pet it slaughtered. If you have the resolve to do so, any strange behavior the Pooka exhibits to get your attention will need to be met by silence and a lack of eyesight and acknowledgement from you. But what if you were feeling a little vengeful, perhaps maybe even a little trigger happy to get revenge for your lovable pet? Physically, a Pooka may be as strong as the animal is taken shape of. In its true form, it may be even weaker due to it being a shapeshifter and, honestly, not exactly having a true form if it hasn't shifted into anything. It might be a bit, or even very difficult to attack something with the form of a loved pet, but any sort of physical trauma, whether that be blunt, sharp, or with some sort of gun, would definitely be possible, and you could send this Pooka 6 feet under. Especially since it aims to hold your attention, so it might not see your attack coming if it's so occupied in doing that. I mentioned a gun just before, but you really could just pull a gun on it, shoot, and that would be it. It's highly likely, and speaking of guns, recently in Vietnam, I shot an RPD, and I'll tell you what, guns are no joke. I know, controversial, but shooting one for the first time and it being fully automatic really put into perspective just how powerful these things are, and how mind-warping, mind-shattering defending yourself, taking the life of another person, and going to war must be. But I also understand the need to sacrifice mental and physical health just to defend someone you love or something you love. And guns are extremely loud as well. Like, extremely loud. As an Australian, I am so far removed from anything gun related, so it was very eye-opening. It became very apparent that a lot of thought needs to go into anything about guns. And I only point all of this out because in my videos, I always have a go-to like, oh, just pull a gun out on this thing. You know, if you want to beat it or if you want to survive against it, and let's just say it would take a lot of bravery and mental fortitude to pull a gun on something, shoot at it, kill it, and then live with the memory and any physical or mental anguishes. I'm not trying to preach anything, it was just very eye-opening. The same could be said about something like a knife, but there's just something about the power of a gun. Anyway, fucking eviscerate— no, I can't I can't transition like that. What I did want to point out was some people think that the Pooka attaches itself to you and it might act as a guardian, especially if you've traveled a vast distance. However, if they're provoked to enact mischievous acts against their will, they'll seek out the blood of their victims. Perhaps that's the version we see in Home Safety Hotline. From here, I wanted to look at the memory wisp because what it does to you is something a lot of people fear: being forgotten. These invisible and odorless entities remove memories from a home and its homeowner. That means removing pictures, photos, and photo albums, which will give you the inability to remember the faces of loved ones. This means that eventually most or all of the physical memories you have of a specific person could be erased. Now that's a disturbing and quite honestly scary thought. To be erased from the minds and consciousness of those close and not so close to you.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Imagine having a long-term partner or your family slowly forgetting of your existence. I hate that thought so much, and what if it gets to a point where you try to see them in person and they threaten you with calling the police, all because they think an insane person is claiming to be their love or close family member they somehow have never heard of or have no memory of. That's quite the scary thought, and it would all be because that loved one has a memory wisp living in their home. Unfortunately, there's no saving those who are under the influence of a memory wisp. Things are 50-50 on whether or not you can attack them physically since they're wisps, meaning that they're lights or spirits. In certain mythologies, spirits have been known to be able to interact with physical objects and people. But since the wisps are invisible and odorless, it would be so hard to try to swat them out of the air, or just hit them in general. So what about if you recognize the symptoms in a person? You could try to take that person's physical memories and artifacts and hide them away, maybe even taking that person to a safe location to make sure they don't lose any more memories and you can make more. But what's to say that the memory wisp won't follow you and continue to steal more of the victim's memories? After all, memory wisps will move out of a home once the memories of a victim are successfully stolen. So if they haven't taken all of them just yet, I can see them marking and following that victim to continue stealing their memories. Physically, they're no harm, but they're relentless on a victim's mind. They can't be beaten, and you'll be left more than clueless. And that's not really surviving, is it? Next up is the mimic-like false artifact, which can devastate and change the life of a family forever. These artifacts are human-designed objects that manifest in the home of a victim seemingly out of nowhere. They make a gentle humming sound that can be heard by young children and small animals. And here's where things get fucked up. People with a false artifact in their homes often report that objects in their house are misplaced, or they're missing children and pets. Well, that's because of what happens when you leave a small child or pet alone in a room with one of these artifacts. Through unknown means, these loved ones can be encased inside the false artifact and digested. If that wasn't bad enough, what makes it worse is that while encased, their cries and sounds for help can't be heard, and they'll be digested slowly and assumably painfully, as this process can take up to several years. However, starvation and a lack of hydration are the more pressing issues when stuck inside. Even so, that might mean that a victim could see the almost digested remains of a former victim or anything else it swallowed. It would make for a hellish and torturous situation for such a young child or small animal, and you would never want it to happen to anyone that you love. Once you're inside of it, you're not surviving. It's over for you. Hope that your family and friends have access to a memory wisp to wipe the memory of you from their minds to assist in their grief. But obviously, prevention is the best cause and way to beat it. If your pet is becoming curious about an object in your home like the TV or a vase, investigate why. Also investigate it if it's something you've never seen in your house before. Pick up the object and really look at it. If nothing seems wrong with the object at first, or the object isn't in its usual spot, maybe it's time to remove or destroy it, especially if you've asked around and no one has owned up to moving the object or putting it there in the first place. If a young child is curious about an object, ask them why. Get them to keep their distance, and if they can hear a gentle humming, then you know what that means. If that's the case, remove or destroy the object from the house immediately. If you're an adult, removing it would be simple since adults aren't necessarily a target for false artifacts. I assume it's because we're just too big, but to truly defeat it, I would say that destroying the artifact would be the better choice since no one will ever have to deal with it again. I did mention that the false artifact is mimic-like, so trying to destroy it might result in something unsavory being revealed. But it's worth the risk, right? If need be, gather some people, arm yourselves, and get ready to face what your false artifact may truly be. Considering that the game doesn't list any hostile mimic-like form, in my opinion, it's still better to be safer than sorry when trying to survive it. Sticking to mimicry, we have the false Beet, which is of similar misery to the false artifact. They're these strange creatures that take on the appearance of beetroot, you know, the vegetable, and they're harmless to everyone unless consumed. Appearing to be beetroot isn't an accident, these creatures want to be eaten. Once they've been consumed by a victim who is now their host, nothing can be done. The false Beet will take root in the stomach and feed off its nutrients for the human's lifetime. That's already enough to absolutely limit a victim's energy levels and bodily functions for the rest of their lives unless they maybe gorge themselves every day, but it somehow only gets worse from here. We can assume that if too many false Beets are consumed, then the host will eventually die out or die faster since there would be more parasitic Beets feeding on their nutrients. And unfortunately, removing the false Beets from the host kills them no matter what, so you'd be stuck with them for the rest of your life. However, I do think there might be a way to circumvent having to give them the nutrients of the food you're digesting. People who can't properly digest food because of a condition they have can receive nutrients directly into their bloodstreams through an IV catheter. This is known as parental nutrition, or PN for short. If you're absorbing nutrients directly into your bloodstream, it would be avoiding the stomach and thus the false Beets. Perhaps that's just a necessary band-aid for the problem at hand, and who knows, it might actually kill the false Beets in the end. Since they wouldn't be getting any nutrients, they might just die out. But Home Safety Hotline doesn't give us any indication of that being the case. Even so, surviving against the false Beet is as easy as avoiding it. They can be differentiated with beetroot upon a close glance, and wearing gloves or washing your hands after dealing with them is a great idea. You could easily throw them away or burn them to the ground. Not growing beetroots in your garden is a good idea too, and so would not eating beetroot in general. Yeah, they're tasty, but if you had to deal with the chances of living with the parasitic mimicry of a vegetable rooting itself in your stomach and stealing the nutrients from your food for the rest of your life, wouldn't you want to lower those chances as much as possible? From there, we have something a bit more confrontational and physically dangerous to a homeowner, the Boggart. They're 6 to 7 feet tall humanoid beings with false faces and are the result of a provoked hob that's gone under metamorphosis. These creatures will bring disasters such as flooding, fires, and electrical outages to the home they reside in, and they often watch their household targets while they sleep. They're extremely disturbing and extremely dangerous, and heaven forbid you spot them and their false faces while they're hiding. They'll become aggressive and violent in those instances. So there's a few routes we can take here in surviving against a Boggart. The confrontational one is surround up the homies, arm yourselves, and utterly devastate the Boggart. However, it's a spirit, so that might not work, but it can interact physically and violently with its environment and you, so who knows. There's also a pretty good chance that someone would be injured or killed in the process. The police department might be willing to put their lives on the line, but they might lean into more passive approaches. Like, for example, just vacating the premise. As long as you and anyone else living or working at the premise don't refer to the Boggart by a name or speak to it, it'll remain at that location and not follow anyone. Another much better solution is to beat it at the root cause. You see, this is a fairy folklore entity just like some of what we've already discussed. And lucky for us, the Boggart is a result of a hob undergoing metamorphosis. Hobs are household spirits that help homeowners by cleaning their house. As to not irritate the creature, it's best to reward hobs with shelter, food, and fluids, and to generally just let it do its own thing. Irritation leads to the previously mentioned metamorphosis, and you don't want that. Different hobs require different needs, so it's best that you know what they like. However, this leaves you in a sort of hostage situation where you have to care for this creature so as to not irritate it for the rest of your life in your home. Unless, of course, you want to deal with a Boggart. Despite that, that would be the best way to deal with it to survive against it. You know, curiously, I kind of want a hob now. Is that bad to say? I want some little guy to come and clean up where I live, and I'll give him shelter and keep him nourished. It kinda sounds like a good time, that is, if you can keep it as a good time. And for our last entity, we have something very grim and disturbing. The Dorcha. It's a creature that appears in the homes through the shadow it casts upon the household. You'd have to be extremely unlucky to be targeted by one. You'll begin to feel a sense of dread, paranoia, and anxiety as you constantly look over your shoulder believing that you're being followed. These sensations will only grow as you see visions of a dark shadow lurking around. The Dorcha will deliver that which it seeks. There is no coming back from deliverance. Your only method of survival is to simply not become a target. And how you become a target and how you avoid becoming one is a complete mystery. So just pray that you don't become one, because all you'll be able to do is inform your loved ones and speed up the grieving process through acceptance of the circumstances. And that's the grim and disturbing reality of Dorcha. There is no happy ending. You will not and cannot survive it. This fey creature will be the last thing you see before you take a look at your life and see that there's nothing left. And on that grim note, we've come to the end of the video. Thanks for watching all the way through, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let everyone know if you do these things differently to beat the entities we looked at in the comments. Like, subscribe, and check out my second channel Soda Jump if you want to see more from me. Shoutouts again to Mythical Films Myths Crypt Film Fest 2. Congratulations again to the winners, and you can find their videos and other relevant links in the description if you want to check them out. And as always, we can't forget the shoutouts to my lovely patrons and YouTube members, and a big shout out to the highest tier Patreon members, Joel Matthew Colgrove and La Creatura. A big shout out to the highest tier YouTube member too, Fogman8U. Thank you for your continued contributions, and thank you to everyone else too. You guys are absolute legends. Stay tuned for more content like this. Everything talked about will be in the description if you want to further look into them, and I'll catch ya in the next one.